Hey Joanne, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here. How you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for joining. I've been doing a lot of research for this podcast, and you are one super interesting person.
Thank you. It was funny to get the invite. I was like, this is unusual. This isn't the typical kind of podcast I get interviewed by. So yeah, really curious to hear what you will ask me and what we will discuss as opposed to all the others I do, which are often like sort of typical animal rights or vegan or photography, but you don't really fit exactly into those categories.
I try and I try and speak to a wide variety of people. So I've had everything from porn stars to members of drug cartels to
Right.
criminologists and everything, and I just like to keep it very, I suppose, varied. You know.
That's how life should be.
Exactly, exactly. Now, one thing, I suppose, one thing that actually drew me to you was I'm a big animal admirer myself. I love animals. My best friend is a 4-year-old Rottweiler called Bruce.
Yeah.
And Bruce is actually, unfortunately, he was at the hands of some cruelty himself. We only have him since March last year, and he's 4 years of age, and he had obviously been beaten to some degree, because even like if you raise your hand around him at all or anything, he kind of
Mm.
flinches a lot. And he was very malnourished for a Rottweiler when we got him, and his back legs were kind of not the best, and walking wasn't a very positive experience. But I suppose I've I, I've witnessed, when I was younger, I've witnessed some animal cruelty, and I often read things in the media where, whether it be something in Ireland or something in the UK or further afield. And I remember there was one thing that stood out to me when I was younger, and it's something that I always remember, and it kind of haunted me a little bit. Of I remember there was kids, and there was a hedgehog, and the hedgehog was, basically what they were doing was they were getting a burnt stick and stabbing him with it, and you could hear him squealing. And there was you could actually get the smell of the burning on his skin as well, because they were doing it to the underside of his belly. And that was something that always stuck with me. And I just can't fathom how people can treat animals so cruelly. And
Mm.
I often think that if people are able to do that to animals, you're capable of doing it to anyone, you know?
It's interesting. Let's start with that. Yeah, that childhood experience, which is really relatable to a lot of people. I mean, I used to pull the legs off of daddy long leg
Yeah,
spiders, and you know, all sorts of things that when you're a kid, on the one hand, kids are really compassionate, but on the other, we're also trying to find some power
yeah,
and exercise power and find our place in the world that way. And
yeah,
but I was a really empathetic kid, and I was always paying close attention to the animals nearby, whether they were squirrels or like a dog locked up in the backyard. I'd go and play with them and walk them. And yeah, it grew from there. My parents never wanted to crush the compassion out of me. I mean, a lot of kids get put down for being empathetic, right? And
yeah, yeah.
laughed at, but that wasn't my experience. So I was really lucky with that.
Yeah. But before we jump on, and I want to revisit that, but what we haven't done is, do you mind actually telling people who Joanne McArthur is? It'd be a good
I'm, a,
start, right?
I'm a woman on a mission.
Yes, you are.
And so I'm a photojournalist from Canada. And I guess more specifically, I'm an animal photojournalist.
Yeah,
I've been documenting our complex, cruel, interesting relationship with animals around the globe now for about 2 decades. I've been to over 60 countries doing this, and over, same amount of time and space talking about these issues as well, talking about ethics, photography, compassion. And so I'm a storyteller.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And just to go back to what you were saying there, in terms of, I mean, what you said is so true, in the fact that if you show empathy, it's nearly seen as a sign of weakness. And that's kind of bred into a lot of people when we're younger. And I think, I'd like to think a lot of us grow out of it. And I think that, so some people don't. You're right. Some people don't, but some people kind of grow out of it, and they say, and you kind of become maybe softer with age, and maybe you get wiser with age as well. But it is interesting that that happens.
Yeah, traditions and the norm get ingrained with us. I mean, we, most of us grow up eating meat. We think of vegetarianism as an ideology, but really carnism as well, which is the word that was coined by a psychologist, Melanie Joy. She's great. But yeah, we're all involved in this thing that is basically invisible, which
Yeah,
is the use of animals.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And
absolutely.
some of us grow out of empathy and some of us don't, but it's also really a gendered thing as well. I mean, men more than women are laughed at more if they're compassionate.
Passionate. Yeah,
And yeah, and there's all those stereotypes, unfortunately, that play into losing our compassion.
yeah. No, for sure. Uh, I was listening to the national broadcaster. I said this to you in an email. I was listening to the national broadcaster over Christmas here, and they were talking about your book, Hidden, and they were speaking about it. And you're obviously a photojournalist that's held in the highest regard, and they were speaking very complimentary things about your book. I actually have looked at your book since, and it is absolutely brilliant. It is
Thank
difficult.
you.
It is difficult, but that's what it's meant to be. And it's meant to be, I suppose. It was hard to look at. It made me sad. It made me angry, but it raised awareness and it made me pay attention.
Wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful. Yeah, that's the work that I started 20 years ago, and I started a project called We Animals, and
yeah,
then We Animals grew into a media agency. So now we're a photo agency, and it used to be me and a camera, but now it's me with staff and project managers and contributors, other photographers, and what we're calling this work that we do is animal photojournalism, because people often don't know what to call me. Often they just revert to wildlife photographer because that's something that is known. And
yeah,
yet I'm not that at all. And so to the book that you're talking about, which is called Hidden Animals in the Anthropocene, um, our job as animal photojournalists is to document the hidden lives of animals. And so not the wildlife, not the pets, but the animals that, live in mass incarceration, basically, and industrial farms, research labs, and fur farms, and the rest. So yeah, I've made a life of doing that.
yeah. Why is that so important to you?
Because the animals, there's a hierarchy of care, and we care more about the charismatic animals. We care more about the animals we know, like the companion animals, the
Yeah,
pets, but that doesn't mean that all of the others, the billions of others, aren't sentient and aren't living a miserable life. And what we don't know is that on this planet of, what are we, 7.5 billion
yeah.
or so,
Something
we
like that.
humans, something like that. Well, we eat 80 billion land animals per year. Like, we're literally eating the world to death, and we're not looking at that. We do it because it's tasty, because it's what all the excuses we have, all the reasons we do it. And yet, like, 80 billion, that's a lot of animals. It's a lot of suffering, and that's exactly what's going on. And I know, because this is my job. I investigate factory farms. I do all sorts of surreptitious things to get into these places so that we can see and be like, holy shit, I
Yeah,
didn't know this.
yeah.
And now I know. And knowing is the beginning of changing, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And I suppose that kind of leads me on to a question of I'm not a vegan. I do eat meat, but one thing that when I was watching one of the documentaries that followed you around the ghosts in our machines,
Yeah.
which was eye opening, and I get just so powerful. When I was watching that, I guess there was kind of an appreciation that do we there's more of an appreciation of where my meat is actually coming from that I never thought about that before. I never put any thought into that, and the ethics that companies are practicing with all of these animals. And I think that people should be paying more attention to that, because I think a lot of us are, and myself included, I think we're kind of hypocrites when we say, oh no, I care about animals and I love animals and whatever, but then you're shoveling a burger into your mouth of some cow that's probably been really badly treated.
I mean, I can't add to that. you you said it, yeah. And
Yeah,
so my job is to show what you're seeing and what you're reacting to. I'm so glad you saw that film. It's called The Ghost in Our Machine, and it
brilliant.
follows me as I do investigative work globally. And and it's really cool that people are paying attention now, and these issues are getting harder to ignore because, literally animal use caused the pandemic that we're in.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's really interesting how we say, oh, the pandemic was caused by animals. No, it was caused by our use of animals. It
yeah,
was caused by the destruction of their habitat and factory farming, which we get zoonotic diseases from, like Ebola and avian flu and all these things. So
yeah.
that's what I do. I go out and I photograph these things, and I get them out into the world. We have millions of viewers, and we've done this book that's doing really well. So now's the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things that you said there, Joanne, was you said that it's becoming harder and harder to ignore. But yes, one of the things that I got from listening to you and watching A Ghost in Our Machine was that mainstream media nearly have a closed door on your amazing work, and they nearly have they want to keep you at, not keep you personally, but you know what I mean, they want to keep the door kind of, it's maybe a little bit ajar, but it's not fully open for you. Why is that?
That's the analogy I use all the time about the door. And I think it's because to face animal cruelty is to face ourselves. And it's very painful because we all consider ourselves good people, which we are. And yet, how can it be that we are contributing to this kind of animal abuse when we're just doing what we normally do, right?
Yeah.
And so you know how we are. I mean, we avoid pain, we avoid suffering, we want to avoid the suffering of others, and it's very easy to just not look. So I think that's part of why all of this is perpetuated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose seeing you at work is one of the things that struck me about you is, I mean, this isn't a job to you. This is, you really, really, really care. And you're not a mercenary, if for want of a better word, that's going out there and this is a paycheck and whatever. But it wouldn't be a very fun paycheck, I don't think. This is something that something has resonated with you, and like you said at the start, Joanne, you're a woman on a mission, and
Yeah.
and and I think that's great to see. Was there any one incident that kind of, I suppose, started the ripples?
Yeah. And I'll go back to what you said, though, about it's not exactly a paycheck. I mean, that's hilarious. There was, zero paychecks for a long time. But what I
Yeah,
would do is I would use my wedding and event photography work. So all that editorial and commercial work, I would use that to pay for the good stuff, as I call it, which is the documentary work,
sure.
which is, of course, like, the most horrible things you could ever confront. But, no one was going to pay me to do this work. So I paid myself to do it. And it grew from there.
Yeah,
And to your question about where things started, well, there was a moment where I was backpacking through Ecuador, and there was a chained up monkey, and there were a bunch of tourists around the monkey taking photos, and they were laughing at this animal and taking pictures. And I stopped and I took a picture because I was like, this is awful. This is horrible treatment of an animal, and maybe I can do something with this image. And I realized that my point of view of what was happening there was more important to the animal than the other points of view. And, I was sort of seeing the animal as someone who could suffer, not just as a point of entertainment. And that was a aha moment for me, for sure, where, we all know camera is a tool for change, but there it literally was. And I felt very motivated, and I felt galvanized, like I could do something.
absolutely. Why is a picture so powerful? What is it about a picture that you capture a moment, a tiny, tiny moment in history? And if you think about it, we live in a life that's live, and there's moments all the time, all around us. And when you capture one moment, why is that so powerful in a picture?
Oh, you said what's so powerful about a picture, but I would say what's so powerful about a good picture.
Yeah,
And something else you said there is moment in time. And that's what photojournalists do. And that's why I love my work, because I get to go out into the world and soak up everything that's happening and hold up a mirror and show the world what's happening. I'm a very curious person. I'm very adventurous. So the life of a photojournalist is perfect for me. And I was inspired by conflict photographers. I grew up thinking, like, wow, look at them out in the world and telling stories that we need to see. But, I think I got off topic there. I don't think, did I answer your question?
No, you did. Seeing you when you're going around and you're doing like, I know in Hidden that there was various contributors in Hidden, but looking again, going back to the documentary, when I was looking at you, I don't know, when you're looking at the video as well, and when you're going around and you can see that you have an empathy and you seem like you have a genuine connection to animals. And I suppose one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and that I'd find looking at it, and I was trying to be empathetic and put myself in your shoes, and I don't think I could do that, to be honest. I don't think I'd be strong enough, because when I was looking at what you were doing, you witnessed some absolutely appalling things, and you have to keep how do you keep your composure?
Well, luckily, you did say there you don't think you could do what I do, but luckily you don't have to, and not a lot of people have to. Luckily, these images can get far and wide, which I'm really grateful for. So it's up to the people who see the images and care about what they're seeing to help share them and talk about them. And so I will say that. But how do I do this work emotionally? Well, I had to learn to put up healthy barriers, and I didn't have that healthy framework in the beginning. And I'm a really upbeat person, really, really happy in life. But after doing so much investigative work, I realized that I was waking up in the morning and my very first thought was of a pig in a gestation crate or that kind of awful scenario. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting unhealthy. And so I sought therapy, and I gained some tools to put some boundaries between me and what I'm seeing. And I realized that I really needed to do that. Otherwise I was going to burn out. And then, I'd be missing out on a lifetime of doing this important work on their behalf. Yeah. And so part of doing the job is looking after yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of some of the things that you've actually witnessed, has there ever been a moment where your emotions, whether it be anger, whether it be sadness, whether it be frustration, have gotten the better of you, or almost got the better of you, where you had to pinch yourself, where you had to, because you're seeing things that most of us aren't exposed to and don't want to be exposed to.
I do have a story about that. I'm glad you asked. I don't get to talk about this very often. So no, I have never lost my cool. But I am really up close and personal with those animals, and I feel deeply empathetic towards them, and I imagine what it's like to be them. And that's my job, is to convey what they're going through. And so I really do get up close and personal. There was one time, though, in Tanzania at a slaughterhouse, where I was filming the close-up of the animals having their necks slit and bleeding out and kicking and flailing, and it's a close-up of the extreme violence and the experience of that animal. And I was there for a number of mornings, and at one point I almost lost my cool. And what I did, and they were watching me, right? Like, here's this white girl, people don't gravitate towards this stuff with a camera. Like, it was weird. Like, it was weird to have this young white woman at a slaughterhouse in rural Tanzania, and they're all watching me, right? And they saw that I was really, really feeling it. And I saw that they were seeing me feel it. And so I looked at all of them and I just said, whew. And they all laughed and patted me on the back. And they're like, yeah, this is life here, And instead of running away or thinking ill of anybody there or anything like that. I just connected with them and they connected with me. And they sure were curious as to why I was doing that. But I said, people don't know where their food comes from. People don't know that this is how animals live and die. And they're like, yes, exactly.
And did any of those people or anyone that you've met along your journey, did any of those people, I suppose, empathize with you and share your, like, say,
Yes.
this isn't, I don't like this either?
Yes, I've had many experiences of that. Unfortunately, a lot of people in these kind of jobs don't want those jobs. They're doing it as a last resort. So I've talked to a lot of people globally who are, for example, collecting broiler chickens 5, 10 at a time, hanging them upside down and throwing them on the slaughter line or throwing them into transport trucks. And they've said to me, can you help me get a job? Like, where are you from? Oh, are there jobs in Canada? Or can you help me get a job somewhere else? I don't want to be doing this. It's long hours. It's violent work. And I'm not saying everyone feels that way, but certainly a lot of them do. It's really low pay, grueling, unhappy business. And also, a dairy farmer came to one of my talks once.
Yeah.
And he was, I guess, about 70, 75 years old. And he sat in the middle and I could see steam coming out of his ears. And then at break time, he moved up to the front row and he had his arms crossed.
Oh.
And it was like his face was bright red. And afterwards, we had a really great talk. And what it came down, like, he's a dairy farmer and he actually has 70 animals, 70 head of whatever it's called, at his dairy farm. And we agreed on just about everything. And so I said, what I'm showing up here is mass farming, and this is how things are done these days. And he's like, yeah, thousands of animals crammed into spaces. And I said, you have to agree that it's unpleasant for those moms to have their babies taken away. And he said, it is. And I said, and we both know that dairy cows can live 30 years, but they tend to be killed between 4 and 6 years because they're spent. And he said, yeah, that's the way it is these days. It's not good. And then he said, he defended himself and he said, well, I didn't grow into a big farm because, like, it's unethical. And, these babies should be able to stay with the dairy moms for at least a little while. And we found a lot of common ground, and he didn't hate me so much after that.
That's good. That's good. I suppose the question I asked you was, did anyone share the common ground with you? But I suppose I'm going to ask the reverse. I'm going to ask, have you ever come across things where you've seen people that, I don't want to say the word sadistic, but where you've come across people and people are like, where they're emotionless or they're callous?
I wouldn't call them emotionless or callous, but I would say that they're doing their job. It's very normal.
Yeah.
Some people are very proud to own, these family-run slaughterhouses and farms. I've certainly been given tours from proud owners. I have been privy to a lot of investigative footage from hidden cameras, and oh my God, we have this footage. Well, not we. Some friends of mine have footage of, like, this guy masturbating on the chickens. There's someone sadistic, more than once in several videos, taking needles and stabbing them into the nose of pigs. Like, he'd call them over nicely and the pigs would come over and then he'd start stabbing them in the nose.
Why? Just for kicks?
Just for kicks, yeah.
Fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Like, that's just...
But gosh, I really like people, and when I see that, I just think, well, that person's been hurt.
What's wrong with the person? Yeah, he's damaged.
Well, yeah, that person is damaged, and what kind of life are they having that they need to exert that kind of violence over people? So, if we want to fix violence to animals, we have to fix, a lot of things about ourselves, and humane education and great upbringings, and get people out of poverty. There's a lot we need to do.
No, for sure, and yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. What I wanted to ask you as well is something that really did touch my heart when I was looking at the documentary was, I'm going to let you actually tell the story. Tell me about Ron.
Oh, thanks for asking about Ron.
Ron. That was, you seem like you've got, that was it was something that I know it touched you, and it was something that kind of really
Yeah.
You could see that it resonated with you, and it was something you had formed a kind of a bond with this animal.
I've met millions of animals, millions upon millions, and people find that hard to believe. How can anyone meet that many animals? But for example, let's say I go to a Mexican broiler chicken facility, there might be 900,000 birds there. So this gives you some perspective. And so, yeah, I've met millions of animals, but some of them really stand out for me. I might have had the fortune of spending more time with them. And one of them is Ron. He's a chimpanzee. And when I met him, he had been rescued from research. And he had lived in a cage suspended from the ground like a bird. And this cage was 5 by 5 by 7 feet. And he was used in invasive research. So as opposed to behavioral, so invasive, they go into your body, they remove things, they inject things. They had removed one of the discs from his spine, and they didn't even give him pain medication for 8 days after that. And the reason I know this is that the rescue had access to all of his files throughout his life.
And he was. Do you mind me interjecting and just asking what country was this in?
Oh, this is in the USA.
The USA, Jesus.
Yeah, and this research facility was closed down because of repeated welfare infractions. And one of the interesting things about Ron is when I looked at his files, I saw that we were born 2 months apart. We were the exact same age. And so I thought about the chronology of our lives. I thought about how, we were both born to a mom, but he was taken away from his mom. And, when we were both 8 years old, I was out climbing trees, but he was the chimpanzee. He should have been climbing trees, but he'd been in a cage for, almost a decade. And then I went off to university to study, but he was being studied, and all sorts of terrible things happened. But what's so incredible about Ron is that he was a very forgiving soul. And after his rescue, he was the peacekeeper in that chimpanzee house at Save the Chimps. That's the group that rescued him. And when there were new chimpanzees arriving, they would often be introduced to Ron first because he was such a welcoming guy. Yeah. And though he had a whole space outside, 5 acres to go out with the other chimpanzees, he always felt safest indoors.
Yeah.
And he had a nest of blankets, and every morning he would arrange that nest of blankets around him where he felt safest.
Oh, that's true. It's the fact that I don't know. Like I think when people see, I often see anyway. Like when you see a kind of I suppose when we associate an animal that's kind of a violent animal or something like that, and you're watching them because they're always the predators or whatever. But I always find when you see an animal that has a kindness to them, and when you see something like that happening to them, and where they're in a predicament that is through no fault of their own and is down to oftentimes human ignorance, human greed, human I don't know, but and these poor animals are just in this situation, and they're at somebody's disposal, and it can be such a cruel life.
We're just taught that they are objects for us. Again, it's this human hierarchy. And, if we can, advance cancer research because of them, then we'll do it. If, we can get easy protein because of them, we'll do it. There are alternatives to just about everything, which is an exciting part of my work as well. I get to talk about those things, including animal research. And I'm happy to say that chimpanzee research is almost extinct globally.
Good. One of the things that I remember that was ringing in my ears from something that you said was that the hardest part of your job is having to walk away and leave the animals behind. Tell me about that.
Excuse me. Yeah, it is. It's very traumatizing to bear witness to someone you can't help. So imagine if you were at a river and, there's like a drowning child or a drowning adult, a drowning dog, and you chose to take a photo of that drowning instead of helping the animal.
Yeah.
So that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do that because these animals are in the billions and because their stories need to be told.
Yeah.
And all I want to do when I go into these places is to free them and give them a life with some autonomy. But I'm one person with a house in Toronto. I'm not someone with like a million sanctuaries. And
I get you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I will say that I have rescued a few animals. It's always wonderful when I have that opportunity, and often it's because I'm with a group of people who can, help me take the animal, or I can help them take the animal right to a vet, for example. And there's a sanctuary space to bring them, but that's not the norm, unfortunately.
No, I got you. And this is a bit of a personal question, Joanne, but how has your work affected your personal life? Has it been a case that, like, do you have nightmares about your experiences? I think I saw you mention that you suffer from PTSD.
Yeah, I do, and I have terrible nightmares all the time. However, I'm built that way. Like when I was a kid, before I knew anything about factory farming, I had nightmares because I'm a really empathetic person.
Sure.
And so that makes me who I am. And I like who I am. And it's a really unusual life that I have. I'm someone who gets close to pain all the time. That's what I want to do, and it's what I choose to do. And somehow I've managed to make a living doing that, which is so odd.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm good at it, and I'm good at carrying it, and I'm good at talking about it. And so I actually feel really, really lucky. My personal life is very different from that of most people. Like, I'm 44 and I chose not to have kids, and I chose not to get married. And I have this really life that's big for me. It's big, it's out in the world, and it's full of discovery and interesting people. And I love it.
Yeah, when you're sitting here and you're talking to me, you actually remind me of one of my previous guests. You're probably getting worried when I say that. No, but there was a guy that I had on who was such a lovely guy, and his name was Ben Anderson, or is Ben Anderson, and Ben is he's a conflict journalist and a documentary filmmaker for Vice. And Ben, again, like yourself, I mean, except it's not animals, it's humans, and he goes to war zones. And I remember he was telling me that he was in when they were liberating Mosul from ISIS. And there's actually video footage of this, but I remember seeing an old man, and he was coming out on crutches, and he was hobbling along, and he had one leg. And then there was another man running out, and he was carrying a little girl who was she was maybe 6 years of age, and she was flopping because her neck was broken. And I was talking to Ben about how it affected him, and he had sought the MDMA treatment in the States, and he found that, but I could tell when I was talking to him that it was something there was still that there was nearly a consequence to his a consequence of his or to his life from his career. It's something that he can never put down, and that stuff that he's seen, that he can never unsee it. And even I got the sense from him that maybe it affected his relationships, and obviously that maybe when he was going out with people that, or in a relationship with a girl or whatever, that she doesn't want him going off to a war zone where his life can be very much in danger and that. But I was just interested to see kind of how, like, because I know that man in the documentary asked you, and he asked you about, I mean, do you have nightmares? And I think you gave a fairly honest answer, and you said, yeah, it is something that kind of haunts you,
Thanks for sharing that, actually.
It's
very relatable.
Yeah, no, and like, absolutely, I could tell, because look, I think that humans aren't. I think that humans, unless there's something wrong with you, we don't like seeing people in distress and things like that. And I think Ben does it for the same reasons. And I could draw a lot of parallels between you and Ben, because he wants to expose and tell a story about things that we're missing as a kind of, I think there's an ignorance to what's happening in certain countries in war zones, and there's another war going on, and there's a war going on that you're documenting.
Thank you for saying that. And that brings us right back to pictures. And you asked, why are pictures so powerful? And it's because a good picture can speak to us instantly. A good picture can change your life.
Yeah.
And pictures changed my life. I remember an image in National Geographic, and I was just a child, and it was a dead zebra, and it was just a close-up of the face, and you could see the reflection of the hunters in the eyeball. And what a weird kid I was. Like, I took that out of National Geographic and I put it up next to my bed. But I was so taken by this, this relationship and the photo itself. So certainly that must have been formative for me.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I'm going to quote you here, and it's something that very, very, very much kind of relates back to that. So you said, and these are your own words, or maybe I'm paraphrasing you a little bit, but although the artistic element to your work is important, it's secondary to creating a connection between the human viewing your work at a later date and the animal that's being photographed.
Well, there we go. I said it, and then you said it, and then I agreed. That's great.
It's so true, though, isn't it? That, like, I mean, that a photo that you can take, and I mean, it's just one small moment in time, but that photo can have a resounding ripple effect that goes on for many. The wave is still going. Maybe 20, 30, 40 years later, we've seen, like, I can think of something, it's not relatable to animals, but remember the picture of the girl running in Vietnam, and she's naked and her clothes. I mean, we're 50 or 60 years on from that. That photo still sends ripples out, and I think your work is the same.
Thank you. That is the goal, and I can see it's having a great effect. I see it worldwide every single day. And that image that I mentioned of the zebra, I actually posted about that on Facebook, comparing it to the eye of a cow, in which you can see the reflection of the transport truck that it's inside. And I put those two next together. And these images were shot like 30 years apart, maybe 35 years apart. And yeah, images do and can continue. Social media comes and goes. We look through things in a flash, but the strong images really stay.
Yeah. No,
it's really noisy out there. Can you hear it?
Okay, no, it's fine. It's fine. If keep yourself warm as well. Don't worry.
Okay.
But in terms of, it's funny you should say that, because one photo that I think had the biggest impact on me from hidden was, there was a picture where pigs were being slaughtered, and there was literally a river of blood underneath their feet. And what people don't realize is that pigs are a very intelligent, highly sociable animal. But the thing that really struck me about this photo was, as one pig was being slaughtered, the other pig was looking on, and he was in great distress. And this was all captured in a photograph. This isn't even a video. And you could see that the pig was trying to escape, and he was in a lot of stress, and there's blood everywhere, and he knows his fate, but his attempts to escape are obviously going to be futile. I just find, I don't know how people do the job, first of all, and I don't know how people can photograph it without that. I'd be in bits doing that.
Yeah, that slaughterhouse, which is in Thailand, they club with a club.
Yeah.
As you imagine, like these prehistoric clubs might look, they club them on the head first. It's meant to knock them out, but it doesn't. Pigs have a very, very thick skull, so it just hurts them and knocks them to the ground. But the people who are working there are, like, there's not a caste system in Thailand, but if there were, it'd be like, the lowest, the most poor people. And also it was the people working there were refugees and people from neighboring countries who had like escaped and just needed some work. I wish I could have talked to them. I was there for such a short amount of time, but I certainly had empathy for them as well.
Yeah. And in terms of your job, because I'd imagine certainly in some circumstances, not all, because a lot of the time maybe people just see it as a fact of life, but is your job sometimes, can it be dangerous in the fact that you're documenting things that some people want to keep under wraps? And have you ever found yourself, or any of your colleagues found themselves in a position where they feel that their own life is in danger, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I did actually mean to mention that earlier. So thanks for bringing it up again when you asked about, people who are on side with me and not on side. And when I go to these places, I have been very lucky. I'm one of the only investigators that I know who hasn't been ticketed, jailed, or beaten.
Wow.
And some of my close friends have been caught in factory farms or fur farms and have been beaten with baseball bats, have had their gear smashed and their cars trashed by baseball bats, broken femurs, concussions, and and jail time for several of them as well, expensive trials. And of course, in the United States now, there's a thing called the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. So people like me can be charged for taking images of factory farms, even from public property. Like that's how protected these places are. And by the way, my friends who were beaten up with baseball bats, the abusers were not tried.
Wow.
No, it was
that was in which country did that happen?
That was Australia.
Australia, wow. And
yeah.
Which is, we're talking a first world country, a democracy there. You'd think that there's higher standards in a country like Australia.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's not work to be done on your own. You have to do this work absolutely securely with exit plans and lots of caution. I don't take a lot of chances. I mean, people think that I do, but I put in as much security as I can so that that kind of thing doesn't happen to me. It's probably not a matter of if, but when, because I continue to do the work. And
because I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong on the actual location, but off the top of my head, I think it might have been in the Netherlands where you got into a mink farm, and was that in the Netherlands? Was it?
I can't remember which instance. I've been to several countries.
Okay, no worries. But it was documented in the Ghost in Our Machine, and so basically you would I don't know, did you break in or whatever, but you got into the mink farm, and I remember something. It seemed like a really eerie place.
They are.
But and I know that this is probably, this sounds like an over dramatic explanation, but do you know what parallel, or what place that I thought it reminded me of? Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, it seemed like an Auschwitz for animals, where basically these animals are condemned to a horrible existence, and that they're basically being just slaughtered.
Thanks for saying that. I'm always happy when I'm not the one saying it, because people will think that I'm being a dramatic animal rights activist. The last page of Hidden is an image that you think is Auschwitz. It's indecipherably, but it's not. It's a chicken farm.
Yeah.
It full of the rows upon rows of buildings and the barbed wire. And you're talking about the mink farms and the fox farms that I go to in the Ghosts in Our Machine, and they are absolutely eerie. And the sounds that foxes make are this plaintive, mournful cry that almost sound like a child. And the mink farms are just absolutely filthy. And you've got sometimes tend to a cage, and mink
they get infected, and they get no medical treatment, or
Oh, absolutely not, because their lives are worth so little. So definitely no medical treatment. And in fact, because mink are solitary animals and they live near water, they're wide ranging, they are extremely stressed in tiny cages, especially 10 of them. So they cannibalize one another. And
Jesus.
what they tend to do is rip off each other's scruffs, scalps, and ears. But that doesn't damage the rest of the pelt, one of those many euphemisms. Doesn't damage the rest of the fur. So you can have a cage full of scalped minks
Yeah.
that are still ready to be put onto a fur coat. I just wish people knew these things.
Yeah, like I was chatting to somebody over in the UK last night, and I was saying that I'm going to be speaking to you, and that's what we were saying. Like, wear fucking fake fur. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not that big a deal. No one
Yeah.
gives a shit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And if people saw the suffering and what animals have to go through, and then the same people are like, oh, I love my Bichon Frise or whatever, and you love your dog, but this is the hypocrisy that I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we think that, well, because fur wearing is so pervasive, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
meat eating is so pervasive, that it can't possibly be wrong. And so we feel really defensive about taking part in these practices without even really knowing the facts, right?
Yeah.
We're just like, no, I can't possibly be taking part in something so terrible. So I'm gonna fucking fight you about all this, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
defend this fur wearing. But it's because we don't know.
Do and this is an honest question. Do you think that meat eating is wrong, or I'm assuming you're a vegetarian yourself, are you?
Yeah, I've been vegan for almost 18 years.
Okay.
And there's this really lovely motto from a sanctuary in Australia. They're called Edgars Mission. And their subtitle for the sanctuary is, if we could live happy and healthy lives without harming others, why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so clean and easy. It's such a simple thing to say, and it's true. And I love to share that with people.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And one other documentary that I wanted to actually ask you about. It's not one that you were involved in, but it's one that you you kind of touched on some things in your documentary, and it's something that there was a very popular documentary called Blackfish that a lot of people have seen, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's excellent, and I definitely check it out because I've been to SeaWorld. I was at SeaWorld when I was younger, and I was at SeaWorld the last time I was in Florida, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and I'll never be in SeaWorld again, and I'll never go to anywhere like that again because it exposed, it shows these are again super intelligent mammals that they're 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 not meant to be held in captivity, and they basically go crazy, right?
Yeah, they do. So thanks again for saying that. I mean, gosh, I know an orca in Canada. She lives alone. Her name is Kiska, and she was wild caught in 1979. And here we are in 2021. All of her siblings died. And how's this? They were brought to Marineland, and the tank she lives in is ironically called Friendship Cove. So she lives alone in Friendship Cove, and it takes her about a minute to circumnavigate that tank
That's
from
incredible.
79 till now.
And the funny thing is that, well, it's not the funny thing. The tragic thing is that orcas in the wild live. I think I don't want to. I'm pulling a number out of my ass here, but I think it's like 120 years or something incredible. And then basically in the wild they live like this really short time frame where and it's purely, and there's something where their dorsal fin in in in
Yeah.
in the wild is like a, if you imagine a great white shark, it's erect and whatever, and then basically when they're in captivity it kind of bends over, nearly making like a small N.
Yeah. You know, something else I've seen is obese dolphins.
Jesus.
Now that does not happen in the wild, of course.
No.
And then you get dolphins in captivity. They are not exercising enough, and they become obese, and they also become depressed. So I have met obese dolphins on anti-depression medicine,
Christ.
and there they are performing for audiences, like just
But no, so I've got two questions there, and it's how are SeaWorld still allowed to operate? That's my first question, and not to you, but in general. And then how do we as I think people are getting wiser, and I think it is improving. And I think, unfortunately, you're always going to get an ignorant element that don't care or whatever. Vote for Donald Trump. I didn't say that, but unfortunately, you're always going to get an element. But I mean, like, when people are seeing that, like, you'd want to be a pretty fucking heartless person to kind of to not have any empathy towards the animal.
And yet these places are built for our amusement. So that's what we expect. And to face something that feels so different from that is very confusing to us. And so we default to, well, this must be okay.
Yeah.
That's what we default to in so many cases when it comes to animals and in life. But look at the damage it's caused. It's so sad.
Yeah, no, for sure. And okay, last few questions before we finish up. You've been very kind with your time, and thank you for that. But in terms of, what do you want Joanne McArthur's legacy to be?
Oh, well, I don't give it much thought. I just want the work to have longevity, and it does. And that's why, I've built a photo agency. That's why there's an archive that has, thousands of my images available for free to everyone helping animals. And so the legacy is hopefully one of kindness and critical thinking. Yeah.
And Joanne, what can we do? What can we do to help? Like what can your average person who's kind of, you see, this is the thing. Some people listen and go, that's a far away thing, that doesn't concern me or whatever, but it does concern us, because like there was one thing, and I don't think it was even mentioned in the documentary, where it was just showing, I don't think it even said any of the words in speech, but it just showed shoes, it showed jumpers, it showed all different things that we're all wearing, and is all that really necessary?
Yeah, my wish is that people will just open their eyes and their hearts to it. We're afraid of pain for ourselves, just as we're afraid of facing the pain of others. But when you do, it's actually liberating, because you can do something about it. You become a more expansive person. You become more critical, and that's a good thing. You can take better part in the world if you are open to the lives of others. So, to your question, what can we do? Well, like, my boss, as far as I see it, is the animals. Like, who am I accountable to? It's the animals. That's why I do everything that I do. And so they would probably want me to say to everyone, stop eating us. Yeah. Stop keeping us in these terrible places. See us. We are a value. We value our lives. We want to live. We want autonomy. And like I said, I've met millions of animals now. And I think that across the board, when they look at me, that's what they're asking. They can't understand why they're there. They can't understand why we're causing them so much pain.
No, good answer. Where can people find more of your work? Where can people buy Hidden?
Thanks.
Where?
Yeah, well, our little agency is weanimalsmedia.org, and we put out lots of stories and images, and we have socials. So all of our socials are We Animals. Excuse me. And the book is on the website as well. You can just Google Hidden book, or Hidden Animals in the Anthropocene. And I'm encouraging people to pick that up. And actually, we made some profit from the book. So what we're doing is we're sending them out for free to people who are influential and people who are going to write about it and talk about it. So if anyone wants to nominate someone that they want to see have a book, we'd love that. And in fact, we have people buying the book for influential people, like literally just sending us $200, and they're like, here, get this to so-and-so, and this covers the shipping too. So it's really nice.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's really cool. And for everyone listening, I'm going to leave the links to all of We Animals in the description to the podcast as well. Joanne, you have a fan in me. You really do. I think you're great. I think you're an absolutely terrific person, and
Uh,
you've got a heart of gold. And keep fighting the good fight, because you're brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been such a nice conversation, and
Yeah,
gosh, time has really flown.
I know. Yeah, yeah. It goes
Yeah.
fast, doesn't it?
Well, I'm just so thankful that you know, so curious about what I do, and you've had some brilliant questions there. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. And enjoy the rest of your Friday over in Toronto. And hopefully the world is back to some kind of normality soon. And if you're ever in Dublin, feel free to reach out.
All right, let's go for a drink or a tea.
Guinness.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right. That's
Okay.
it. Thanks, Joanne. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.